GEO Group, which is one of the largest for-profit prison corporations, has just secured a federal contract in the amount of $110 million to build a new facility specifically meant to detain undocumented immigrants. Now, according to Talking Point's memo, the GEO Group said that its 1,000-bed detention facility will be in Conroe, north of Houston, and will open by the end of next year. GEO already operates the 1,500-bed Joe Corley Immigrant Detention Center in the same small town. So it's a little strange that they need another for-profit prison to detain undocumented immigrants in the same area. But if you've been paying attention to our reporting here at the Young Turks, you've known that we've been covering for-profit prisons and how absolutely disastrous they've been, how they do not cut costs. They're not really private prisons, they're privately run, but they have investors and they want to make a profit. The whole point is to detain as many people as possible so they can make as much money as possible. And so if you're concerned about undocumented immigrants using up our resources, well, this is a perfect example of how detaining undocumented immigrants actually makes you, the taxpayer, spend your money on something that we shouldn't be spending on. But anyway, I want to give you guys a chance to chime in and I'll give you some more details to this story.
Well, it's not just Texas, it's also, these have been going on in Arizona. I know that I have family who actually worked in a medical facility that is privately run and owned and operated, and ICE kind of oversees it. So we have all these contracts with ICE that sort of facilitate the housing and warehousing of essentially immigrants. So if we're going to end this quote unquote catch and release program and we're going to basically warehouse people until we get their paperwork in order, until we ship them out. We're essentially starting another industry of essentially warehousing people who are, in violation of the law.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's very, very costly.
It leads to a gigantic profit motive in criminalizing people who are simply coming here looking for a better life. And look, I understand we can't have a system where we just let people come in and we open our borders. No one's asking for that. But you want common sense legislation, you want common sense regulations to, deal with this issue, and we're doing the exact opposite of that right now.
Exactly. I think it's interesting the way in which these immigrant detention centers are increasingly modeled after our criminal justice models, right? So even outside of detention centers, there are bond programs or other forms of surveillance systems, right? That look a lot like how we deal with criminal justice, which is also privatized. So I think when we examine this, we got to look at some of the racial structures, the economic imperatives that kind of undergird this issue and ask, why are these policies kind of forming in the way that they are?
Exactly. And so, at the tail end of the Obama administration, Obama had made the decision to stop using federal or for-profit prisons on the federal level. Right. And so, of course, Trump came in and he completely undid that. The stock prices for these for-profit prisons shot up. And I'm sure after they secured yet another federal contract paid by our taxpayer money, the stock for GEO Group will shoot up again. And so you don't want to have this type of incentive, a profit motive structured into our justice system. But unfortunately we do. And I was hoping that, this system would get better after the Obama administration, but of course it's not. I mean, you have Donald Trump, who is a product of a corrupt political system. He's exploited that corrupt political system. What makes anyone think that he wouldn't do any favors for corporations like GEO Group? So to give you some more details on this, US Immigration and Customs Enforcement already has a record of more than 41,000 detainees. That number is expected to increase. And also the agency has also identified an additional 21,000 unused beds that it plans to use for detention. So understand that these for-profit prisons usually have contracts that indicate that the government, whether it's on a state level or a federal level, needs to provide a minimum occupancy rate, right? So let's say that these beds are not being used. Our taxpayer money still has to pay for the beds as if there are inmates there. And it creates an incentive where if there are unused beds, well, we just need to detain more people, right? And so that's another issue. Also, Trump has instructed ICE to detain all individuals suspected of violating immigration laws. As soon as you come into this country, you cross the border and you're undocumented, you're breaking the law in Trump's book, and you could be detained in one of these detention centers.
So, in other words, they'll be filling up and they'll be, building more of these facilities.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And conditions will probably decline, right, as populations rise in.
Right, because if it's run like a business, think about it. They want to cut costs and maximize profits. So there have been a number of reports regarding for-profit prisons that, there was just heinous behavior, inhumane treatment of the inmates, not providing the necessary medical care. And so that's unsurprising when you run a prison like a business. So this is not a good situation, and I apologize that we're opening the second hour with such a depressing story, but this is, one of the many devastating, outcomes of Trump's presidency and his administration.
I had this family member who works in a facility in Arizona, and there had been no deaths, and they go out of their ways. He's a nurse practitioner, and he goes out of his way, and they all do, to make sure that there's medical care for everyone who needs it. And they're so closely monitored by groups that come through these facilities daily. Some of them very high profile, like John Legend comes through with a group and another group. But so there's a lot of attention to make sure that everyone is cared for and fed. But it's like the idea of just stockpiling, warehousing, or building facilities to detain anything while we don't address real issues. It's just another way of just, as you say, profit inducement is sort of winning the day rather than really confronting the complexity of the issue. And we have a Congress that doesn't want to confront it. So
they don't want to confront it because they're essentially paid by the same corporations who have an interest to keep this going, right?
Exactly.
So this is their bread and butter. They're going to continue doing this, right? And we have these conversations about the war on drugs and why marijuana on a federal level continues to be criminalized. It's still listed as a Schedule I drug, and people are like, that doesn't make any sense. Why is it happening? Well, it doesn't make sense to the electorate, right? But it certainly makes sense to the politicians. It makes sense to the people that are lobbying to continue prohibition because they make money off of it.
Membership helps fund the Young Turks. You know one great thing about that? That means we're not accountable to anyone but you guys. That's why we're strong together, because we built this show around you. Come build it even bigger and better at tytnetwork.com/join.